relatively new technology.
Okay.
Okay. And let me talk about let me talk to you about CAS a little bit. Okay. CAS is a hands-on learning center on campus. We are self-support, and by doing outside projects. That means if you work with us, you will get a chance to gain the real world working experience before you graduate. And also we are in a very convenient location. We are in a learning center, and it's very convenient on campus. And also we are very flexible. You make your own schedule. You can work before your class, after class, or between your classes. So, and this is a very valuable experience. Think about when you look for a job, this experience will make you outstanding. Okay? And if you want to know more about CAS, let me know. Okay? And Rob is one of our best students, and he will be his talk. Okay?
Thank you. Intel is stealing our thunder right now. So I'm going to be talking about transpilers, which is kind of a weird made-up word that only really shows up in JavaScript land. And it has to do with the fact that not every browser has the same features as every other browser. So, IE being the example that everyone fears. Typically, you'll want to write JavaScript one way and have it run on browsers that don't let you do that. So, transpiling's the word for the process of taking JavaScript that runs in some browsers and making it run in other browsers. It's going from the same language to the same language, which makes it a bit different than, like, you know, compiling. You're going from source code into something executable. Definitely different languages, different environments. Transpiling is just the same thing except same language. The most famous of the transpilers is called Babel. Babel, I want to say it's been around for about 2 years. Babel doesn't do much by itself. You use plugins to make it do what you want it to do. And so, very commonly, you'll use one of Babel's presets that lets you write in the newest, best flavor of JavaScript, and it will take it down to, say, the package that I use is called Babel preset env, and Babel preset env targets the last 2 versions of all major browsers. That process is, you could get lost in learning just how to configure Babel, but typically you'll just end up using someone's like example project, copy their config, and then only change it if it doesn't work somewhere that you want it to work. But Babel is not the only transpiler. TypeScript is, it's kind of a transpiler. TypeScript does 2 things. It will take new features, you know, back in time so that you can run them on old browsers. Hello. And the other thing TypeScript does is it adds new features to the language that aren't really transferable. So when you use TypeScript, you're kind of compiling, but you're also transpiling. You could just write regular JavaScript and then use TypeScript to take that back in time. TypeScript is really good at, say, making a particular JavaScript run on IE. So if you have to target Internet Explorer, or you're going to like use a framework called React or one of its siblings, TypeScript is pretty dang useful. And both of these tools have little like real-time conversion examples. And so as an example, one feature that is new in like modern versions of JavaScript is const and let as variables instead of var. And so you can see the TypeScript takes that back down to var, so that it's going to run where constant let aren't recognized. Another good example would be arrow functions. So if we made an anonymous function that does nothing, you can see that it took it into the old function declaration. TypeScript is incredibly intelligent about how it does this. So if you wanted to use one of the new keywords, async and await can make JavaScript look really, really clean, but it practically only runs on the latest version of only Chrome and Firefox. It might have just been picked up by Edge, but when you're writing code for a browser, you can't assume everyone has the latest whatever. So you want to take it back in time. So let's make an async function. It becomes terrifying. And if we were to do something in this function, like just print to the console, hello, we could wander through this huge angry blob and eventually find our hello way the heck down here. But you don't have to know how to do this. TypeScript's doing it for you, which is incredibly helpful. Because if this was like some asynchronous function here instead, you could easily just await it. This gets way more complicated. You don't have to deal with it. You just write that. This is the file you give to the browser. And like Babbel's the same way. If we were to go to Babbel's website, they have a similar little playground tool. And so see if we write an arrow function, it gets turned into the old type. And I think that their example here is using the Babel preset env thing I was telling you about. So it looks great when it's in the browser, but you're not going to write your source code in the browser. So you're going to have files somewhere, and you're going to expect that there's some kind of command line tool. I have, at the end here, a link that I'll leave up. We have example projects in here for the stuff that I'm about to show you. So if you were to go to Cass's GitHub, all of the training that we create is free, basically. We're trying to make sure that we have like an up-to-date set of things that grow. So like I gave some talks about JavaScript in the past. A lot of that training material is also, actually all of it is in that repo, and hopefully is a bit easier to digest than some of the other like introductions to modern JS. But if you wanted to, you could go ahead and pull this and play around with using the compiling tools. At the end, I'll help if either of you want to like mess around with setting that up. I like answering questions. So in that repo, I have a transpiling folder, and then I've got a TypeScript and a Babel example. The TypeScript, I think, is maybe a bit easier to see what's going on. So the standard is to have some kind of folder for your source files and then some kind of folder where the compiled files show up. I've seen it named source and dist a lot, so that's what I'm calling them. The land of JavaScript desperately needs better standards. In here, we have a .ts file, and it is named as such because I'm using fancy TypeScript features that won't work in a browser. And I've got a little interface there that's, an example user or something. And a little TypeScript sales pitch here. You can use the types in your function parameters. You can specify types on variables, and the TypeScript will double check you and make sure that you're using the correct things where they're available. You also get some nice things like if you've ever programmed in C# or Java, you might like, I don't remember what Java calls it, but I know C# calls it IntelliSense. When you have an object and then you do a dot and you get the autocomplete of things that are on it, you'll find a lot of JavaScript developers that miss that. And TypeScript brings it back in a way. So if we were to, what am I saying? So we've got TypeScript, but we want to compile it. The easiest way, I think, to get TypeScript to be kind of a shared tool so that you would check this code in on GitHub or somewhere that it gets shared. You might even have like a, I don't know, Dropbox or something terrifying like that. But you're going to want to share this. So the easiest way to get other people up to speed is to use what Node and NPM already do with the package JSON. So TypeScript is listed as a dev dependency in this JSON. How it got there was by me going into that project and then running npm install. Capital D is short for save dev. Sorry. I only ever use the shortcuts. And this is going to make sure that it goes in the right category of that package JSON. And then you could say TypeScript, because that's the name of the package. Doing it this way, as opposed to like, if you went to TypeScript's website, they'll have like some .exe installers. Those will also make TypeScript available, but then other people who work on your code are going to have to know to install this tool also. However you do that is up to you. I find that using the package JSON is a pretty clean way, because then someone else can clone your repo, and then all they have to do to have TypeScript is npm install. That should go away. This is probably the biggest pain of using a transpiler. So yeah, you get to write in some modern fancy version of JavaScript, but now everyone who works on your project has to have these extra tools installed, and they have to know when to use them and how to use them. So you get that trade-off. You're not just writing JavaScript that you can just run anymore. You have to go through this extra step before you deliver it. And that complexity can sometimes feel a little overwhelming, especially in really large projects where there's multiple things that all have to be built. Because you'll be like, okay, so what was the command? I don't even remember. The way that I've installed it as a dev dependency means that the command we want to call is not available. Just globally in the command line, it's not anywhere to be used. The easiest way to use it is to use this tool that comes with Node now called TSX or NPX. NPX will look to see if one of these commands you want to execute has been installed already, like where you are, and then use that version. So instead of telling people to go to a website and download the latest TypeScript and then use TSC, you can just have people write npm install and then npx TSC. One of many ways, but the one I'm advocating right now. TSC will look for a config file, and then if it works, it's going to spit out the files without telling you anything else. If it breaks, TSC will tell you, what files are broken, what you need to go do to fix them. TSC will also sometimes it will produce the final file, but it will warn you that there's something that you could do better. Another benefit of using TypeScript or one of these other transpilers is that they can catch you and try to help you not make dumb mistakes. This worked, so if we were to go over to our text editor
in the dist folder is a file that looks like regular JS. If I was to put that side by side to the original file, you can see that like the fat arrow function down here got turned into an array, just a regular anonymous function. If I was to do, remember how scary Babel got as soon as you used async? Same deal here. You change the file, you would re-execute your build command, wait for it to go, and then you could, if you were loading your built files in a web browser or something, you would hit F5 to reload after that finished. Our compiled file got terrifying again, all because of async await. But you wouldn't even be looking at this file typically. You would just be running it in the browser and seeing whether or not it throws an error. And then using Babel is extremely similar in terms of having a source folder, having a dist folder. I should show you the config. So when you use TypeScript, you have a tsconfig file, a tsconfig.json. You can specify where you want the output files to be put. TypeScript will make a one-to-one conversion. So whatever you name the file in your source folder, it'll be named the same thing in the dist folder. And then I've set the target as ES3. ES3 is the version of JavaScript that is like old Internet Explorer, and that's the default for TypeScript. So TypeScript just comes ready to make it run in old Internet Explorer. One of the cool things that TypeScript does for free is it will do multiple files. So if we were to add another file in source, we would end up with another file of the same name inside of dist. Babel is not quite as smart. So Babel's the same way. We have some kind of source JavaScript, and this one, as you can guess, is going to get terrifying because it has async and await. And all that is really happening here is that it's going to pause for a second and then finish the sentence. But there's much scarier ways of writing that. Async await is so nice. And then the thing I'm using down here is a ES6 import-export statement. Using the word import and export is really special, and it's only, I think it's in Chrome. Firefox will only understand it if you change one of your config settings that's in the hidden config of Firefox. Internet Explorer will have no idea what it is. I don't know about Edge. Edge has been pretty good about knowing what modern JavaScript is, but I mean it's a little slower than Firefox and Chrome. I don't think Microsoft can really devote all of their resources to keeping Edge up to date. But what this gets turned into, oh, well, I should show you the command. So in the package JSON for this, I have Babel CLI and Babel preset env. And so if you had Babel installed some other reason, you wouldn't need that, but this is my favorite way of doing it, is including it in the project so that no one else has to know what to install. It'll just be available. And it would be the same kind of process. So if we go back into that folder, transpiling Babel, we can make sure that we have everything installed. This computer is very slow. Very, very slow. But just like with TypeScript, I had npm install save dev babel-cli and npm install save dev babel preset env. And then those commands added it to the package JSON file. So now anyone else who runs this just needs to run npm I and will get what they're supposed to get. Same deal here. npx lets you run a command that's been installed in the node modules. The name of the command that Babel CLI adds is Babel. That's another annoying part, is that when you're using these build tools, like TypeScript wasn't called TypeScript, it was TSC. You wouldn't know that unless someone had told you, or the tutorial you're following was like, hey, be aware, it's going to be called this when you use it. Luckily, Babel's a little more straightforward. Then you would specify your input file, and then you would specify your output file, which means this command gets kind of ugly when you have a lot of different files that you want to convert. There are tools that help make that look prettier with Babel, but Babel, as a default, is like one file in, one file out, versus TypeScript did just all of them at once. We can run that. Takes a long time because this computer is slow. And if we go and look, so here's that source file. I'm going to open up them side by side again. And here's that compiled file. I'll just put it here. So because we had the import-export thing, Babel added this weird defined property exports statement. We can see that Babel does something really similar to TypeScript. It uses something called a generator, and then made a big switch, statement with different cases. And then hiding in here are the actual things that we wrote in the other file. And then way down here, the export default fn got turned into the older style exports.default equals fn. But typically, you're not rooting around in those. It's just, if you want to use async await, you would add Babel to your project, and then you would keep going on your way. Every, so often you'd have to rebuild when you were testing. If you install VS Code as your text editor, VS Code will, there was a cool little setting, I don't know if you spotted it, in the TS config in the TypeScript project. Compile on save will tell the text editor that anytime you hit Control S, it should try to do the compile for you. If you use VS Code, you'll even see the TypeScript errors in the editor. If you use Atom, like I'm using, you'll have to install Atom TypeScript package. To get that fancy IntelliSense stuff, you'll have to install extra stuff. If you use Visual Studio, you get all of it for free. I think there's the Visual Studio plugin you have to install for TypeScript to get that stuff to go, though. Compile and save is nice. And then you don't have to keep opening up your terminal and rerunning the command. But that's the gist of it. You have some source files. You want them to run on old browsers. You have some command line tool that helps you do it. You have an output. It's not thrilling, but it lets you use nice modern JavaScript features. And that's really the only reason to do it, is there's something that you want to use that's new. You don't. The other kind of interesting reason I find is that I don't find it beneficial to spend my time learning how to make my code work with old browsers, because it's like at that point you're not working on what you're really trying to work on. You're not doing your homework. You're not making functional code for your employer. You're having a history lesson. So if someone else can do the converting to back in time, let them do it. And they'll probably have thousands of tests on that process, so it'll be much more well, the created file
will probably work because they've done way more. That's the only thing they were working on making happen. You had other code you were also trying to make work. So that's why you have a lot of modern JavaScript projects have some kind of transpile step. A lot of them don't do transpiling directly. They won't actually use the TSC command. They'll use some other tool that happens to use TypeScript on the inside. That's like bundling and other things, like if you've ever heard of Webpack or Rollup. Typically people will make that tool use TypeScript internally so that all they have to do at the end of the day is type in a single command and everything that's supposed to happen to your files happens at once. I think we're going to try to talk about bundling in a later lesson after the winter break. So feel free to look for that and show up. Bundling can be kind of a nightmare. But if you understand when you use a tool like Babel or TypeScript, what it's kind of doing at its basic level, then it'll make it easier for you to use the more complicated tooling that shows up everywhere. Like Facebook and Netflix both use React in Webpack. So it's not like, you know, it's getting more complicated for no reason. Internet giants are making it more complicated, and so if they, you know, if someone like Facebook has decided that this is an important part of their build process, there are reasons for it, and it's worth, if you intend to, you know, I would say that like React and Angular 2, some of these other front-end frameworks, if you like doing JavaScript in the browser, you're going to encounter these build tools like, you know, TSC or Webpack. It's worth knowing.
I think that's pretty much everything I had. So if you were interested in playing around with either one of those, I have no problem helping you get set up. Otherwise, that's pretty much everything I have. Questions, I guess? No pressure. It was a lot of stuff to just be dumped. JavaScript is best learned kind of slowly. So you'll see the exact same stuff make itself known to you in some other way, and you'll be like, oh, okay. And then feel free to look at what we've put online.
Thank you, Rob.
So,
Junior.
is it a lot?
Junior, okay. So you feel everything?
Yeah, we can last time.
You had any idea of topic listener?
Yeah.
Say again?
Event listeners.
I think the lectures have been really interesting.
Edit?
And event listeners.
How we can
Sorry.
how we can
In nowadays,
And track more
Oh.
people. I don't know.
No,
I've actually been surprised
I
with
mean,
how very good people coming. I think
Are you remarking on the theme?
The Intel lectures.
No,
just about
sorry.
I'm sure
I was asking
a lot of people, if they weren't going there, they'd be here. I think a lot of clubs probably meet around this time too. So might just be the time.
what's the breaking time?
I don't know. This is a great time for me. I couldn't say what a better time would be for other people. So I
Just
wish I could
in general, Node?
Yes.
Or Node events specifically?
If you
It's like
just
even class.
A little bit. I've used an event emitter for
Yeah, I'm actually really interested.
when I had something that was like supposed to be synchronized.
Right.
right?
I've
Right.
since
Then
like
it's alive.
I guess tried to get away from it, but
And your work, so you learn how
The
to
issue is
what about
Are there positions available now?
actually just running like
Next term?
Yeah.
Okay.
even different
And how should I
events,
just contact
other
Cass directly?
Where we are,
are you looking to use
No.
right?
I was specing an error.
Two
It
now.
shows
209.
you
Okay.
a warning showing
Yeah, stop by
that
and
your listener has or has
and
exceeded level
but
and something.
now
Oh, yes, that one. So,
every job on campus, you
Then I was checking the Google I got this.
jobs,
Which I was not.
it's worth looking at. There's a function on the implementer that you should probably know about.
I think this thing set max is not.
So that's one of and so if you know about how many event listeners you're gonna have,
Like around the
other
beginning
thing that's kind of important is actually event
and
emitter
every
dot
weeks.
a couple
or
hours. Okay.
event listener.
The remote is not.
All right.
We,
Mhm.
because students are constantly,
Yes, and so if you have
by the way,
like you're doing web like front end stuff,
class,
sometimes you'll add an event listener and something gets created, but then if
so they
the
graduate.
thing is gonna get destroyed, you gotta remember to remove the event with the listener that goes with it.
Alright. So yeah, they're always new.
If you don't care about those event
You know,
listeners,
apply,
because
yeah?
each one of those that gets created takes a
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
it
Thank you
could
for
become a
doing this
library,
lesson. I really appreciate it.
but it's so there will probably be somewhere where you want to add a remove listener.
Oh,
Which means if you add listener and you just put the function
It's
directly.
gonna see what all
function
of
at all.
you next term.
Oh,
So I don't think my opinion is well next term.
So we just don't know why students
Yeah.
are not interested. Even like this,
Okay.
it's hard to continue, right?
Exactly.
Might be
I don't
worth
know, I think
trying
students have a hard time going
follow
out their
that
way to get
chain
new
and
information.
see
And it's kind
where
of
it's
sad because they should
where it's
be
coming
inherently
from.
excited about what they're learning.
But is this so? This is
A
Express.
lot of people know this.
Have you ever used
Why I say
debugging,
that is because the first time
remote
it's
debugging
like
before?
50 people.
Oh.
Oh,
So there's like there's a flag you
That
can
was
add when you run
like
the
50
app.
people, this
You
would
know,
kind of
dash
fit.
dash debug
We
app.
don't have enough chair.
And then if you open
Borrow
Chrome
chair from
and
the room,
SF12,
outside.
That one I haven't read
So-
it'll give you the little so
Yeah.
that might help
And maybe
you
the Intel
like,
might
if
take
you
a long
can-
way from us too.
if you look at the call stack or look at the
I
whole
don't know
error
why.
trace. That might help you get there. The
Let's
other
say
thing
there's
is
a new
maybe just
restaurant, right? I don't come
concept
hey,
about
I'm going to check
logging
out,
everywhere and
Gradually,
seeing
right?
where it happens.
Like, yeah,
But yeah, if it's
and
something
now
else
and
throwing
this
it,
this
it
many
might be an
customers we
indicator
get.
that you're doing something
But we don't know
wrong.
how many
but-
customers we get.
Well, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you're very concerned about
It
memory,
could
I
be,
would
it could
fix
just
it.
be
If you're
time.
not that concerned about
Yeah,
memory
Intel
leaks,
has a bunch of
because your
stations
servers
and
turn off and on all the time or
people are
something,
probably going
it's
to
probably
go
not a
into
big deal.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I'm creating a van,
Thank you.
Android app, it will make every
Have a
possible
good
service.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, so it might maybe even for your own sake.
Thank
it'll
you.
understanding it
Yeah,
might be
no
worth-
problem.
This is our last time for this term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so I want to
See you tomorrow, okay?
yes be